With Cliven, Bundy, and Donald Sterling very much on the minds of Americans, we are once again thinking about racism. In this case, white racism. What does it actually look like in America? And I think that if you were to ask most libs, what is a racist, they would say probably an older white conservative person. But that's basically an assumption. And on this show, at least usually, we like to go beyond the assumptions and actually see if there's some data to support or possibly cause us to question our long-held beliefs about the world. So we're going to be looking at the General Social Survey, the GSS. Now this is a big social scientific tool that's been done, a huge survey. It's done frequently every couple of years in the country, and it asks many questions about American society. And so using this tool and the fact that it goes back into the 70s, social scientists can say quite a bit about what Americans think and how it's changing over time. And thankfully, there are many questions that can allow us, at least in some way, to measure racism. We have a number of those different questions, and now we're going to look at a chart that breaks down responses to those questions based on if you're a conservative or if you're a liberal, based on if you're a Democrat or a Republican. And we're going to see, is our assumption correct? So the first one, whites who say they would not vote for a black president. There you're seeing lines for both white Democrats and white Republicans. It's not broken down by age necessarily. It's not broken down by gender. All we've got is the party right here. But look at those lines. They're not that far apart, even going back to the 70s. And they basically track, up until about 94, it looks like, very close together. And Democrats are even higher at a couple of points along there. Now, you do see this eventually flips right around the time we get Barack Obama. Not necessarily when he's elected, but when he starts to run for president, you see Democrats becoming more okay with the idea of voting for a black president. Republicans right afterward, just about the same as in the past decade before that, in saying that they would. Now, understand that those numbers on both the Democratic side and the Republican side are very low at this point. And of course, the natural follow-up to that is to say, well, they're lying. And you're almost certainly right. There is a social desirability bias that goes into this. But unless you can come up with Democrats are more or less likely to lie than Republicans, then sure, we understand that the numbers are probably worse than that when it comes to voting for a black president. And yet we can still compare them. And so that's our first evidence. The second one, whites who say blacks are more unintelligent than intelligent. Again, man, you look at those numbers and they're just a couple of percentage points off, except maybe around 2000 throughout, from before the 90s until today. Very, very close. Again, you see Democrats very briefly higher. And so in this case, again, this evidence does not support the idea that white conservatives are necessarily more racist than white Democrats. Third chart, whites who say blacks are more lazy than hardworking. Here you see a couple of larger gaps, oddly in 2004, you see the Democrats shooting down but then going back up. And you see the Republicans believing blacks are more lazy than hardworking. That shoots up after Barack Obama is brought into office. Now, again, always, him being elected president is not the only thing that happened in those years or in the years that came after that. It could be a consequence of the recession and things like that. And yet again, the gap not very big between Democrats and Republicans. Another chart, whites who oppose a close relative marrying a black person. This one goes back again to 1990. And you see both of them going down over time, which is good news. The Democrats always lower than the Republicans on the opposition to this. You see it goes up a little bit after Barack Obama is elected. The Republicans, going up. And what I would take out of that particular chart is, one, that Republicans do tend to be more against it, but more importantly, both Republicans and Democrats going down very quickly. Although, just sort of a historical side note, 1990 is not that long ago. I'm sure the vast majority of you watching this were probably politically aware at that time. 70% and 65% for Democrats in 1990 were against it. I mean, we're talking Roseanne was on the air, and still the vast majority saying it wouldn't be okay. Number's still too high, by the way. It's over 20%. Another one. Whites who say too much money is spent on improving conditions for blacks. Here again, you see at least one point where Democrats believe it even more strongly than the Republicans. Now, what you really see, though, is after the economic collapse, you see those numbers really sort of going away from each other. Republicans moving back up higher than they had been at any other time since it looks like the early 80s. And so that's a scary sign. Democrats going down after spiking after 08. And look, that shouldn't be surprising at all, because when the economy is not doing well and government money, there's only so much of it, people are going to want it to go towards their group. And so feelings like racism and feeling like you're competing over the money are going to go up, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. Finally, if you take the responses to all of these and you map out sort of the negative racist sort of possible responses, and you can create an index of negative racial attitudes, we've got this going from 1990 to 2012. Combine all of those, and here you see that the Democrats are always less racist than the Republicans, but the gap is not very big. Again, Republicans do go up after Barack Obama is elected. You see the Democrats are effectively always dropping down, and significantly so. You see 40% in 1990. It's cut in half by 2012. The Republicans losing about 50% of that racism, at least measured in this way. And so, look, I'm not covering this because I have a lot of conclusions. I just think that it's interesting and it's worth looking into. Simply saying one group is more racist than another, you might very well have anecdotal evidence of it. You might even have a lot of people that you've met that backs up that belief, but we actually have data that looks into it. Now, as I said, social desirability, I totally understand if you believe that maybe that's affecting Republicans more than Democrats, but this is some interesting research, and it shows that, one, things have been getting better for the most part, whether you're Republican or Democrat, but two, Democrats not all that less racist than the Republicans. So it looks like we've got more work to do. Anyway, that's all I've got on this subject. Now it's your turn. Head down below the like button to the comments section and let me know what you think about this research, if you think that this is a flawed way of looking at racism in America, and if possibly it has made you question what you think about the nature of racism between Republicans and Democrats.